My lords, opinion formers and mainstream media has latched on to the phrase cost of living crisis. In reality, it is a crisis of poverty, inequality, failed economic policies, irresponsive state and democracy that is preventing millions of people from living a fulfilling life. The crisis has been incubating for years, but the main reason for that is the failed ideologies which the party opposite seems to venerate. There is a twofold attack on people's well-being. Firstly, by shrinking their disposable incomes, and secondly, through an escalating cost of living, with inflation, as measured by RPI, already at over 12%, taxes at 70-year high. Just last month, food prices increased by nearly 15%, and the weak pound means that we are also importing inflation. Yet the government has no strategy for dealing with corporate profiteering at all. If anything, the government's mantra is to further shrink people's disposable income by cuts in real wages and pensions and public services which enable people to get health care and related services. Due to government's policies, the richest 250 people in this country are now worth nearly 711 billion, compared to only 658 billion the year before. Clearly, there's no cost of living crisis for the rich or the rich people who donate to the Conservative Party, but there is a cost of living crisis for the rest of the people. While many have been getting rich, at the same time the living standards of the masses are now lower than the average for developed countries. Financial Times reported that the poorest 20% in Ireland have a standard of living almost 63% higher than the equivalent poorest in the UK. In 1976, workers' share of GDP in this country in the form of wages and salary was 65.1%. Following attacks on trade unions, zero-hour contracts, fire and rehire and other policies, that share is now down to 50%. Not really surprising that people can't get access to good food, housing, education, pensions, healthcare, and much more. Even before the pandemic and the energy price crisis, some 14.5 million people were living in poverty. This included 8.1 million working-age adults and 4.3 million children. That number is expected to hit 16 to 18 million before long. Thanks to the government's policies, 21 million adults in this country have an annual income of less than 12,570. Has any minister tried to live on that and see how they actually manage? Even with the freezing of energy tariffs announced by the Truss government, we don't know what the next one's going to be called, some 6.7 million households are in fuel poverty. And if the government does not continue its support beyond next April, that number is expected to rise to over 11 million. 800,000 children don't even get free school meals because their parents have an income of more than £7,400. The tax system favoured by the government clobbers the poorest. The poorest 10% of households pay 47.6% of their gross income in direct and indirect taxes, and the richest 10% only pay 33.5%. In the face of government abandoning its duties to its citizens, people have to rely on charity for survival. Teachers, nurses, police are relying upon food banks. There are 1,400 Trussell Trust food banks, and in addition there are also nearly 1,200 independent food banks. They dished out 2.1 million emergency food packages in the last year. 832,000 of them went to children. Our senior citizens are taking endless bus trips and are huddled in libraries, shopping malls and warm hubs just to stay warm. In case the minister wheels out the slogan, "We are providing energy help," just like to remind him that even with that, energy prices have more than doubled. The government has somehow managed to find a magic money tree and conjured up £65 billion to bail out the gilts market. But the same magic tree is never really plucked to eradicate poverty, reduce inequalities, or make investment in public services. This government has set unprecedented records. Let me just give you some example. A study published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health has reported that there were 334,000 excess deaths in the period 2012 to 2019. The cause is austerity. In 2016, Exercise Cygnus concluded that the NHS would struggle to cope with a serious outbreak of flu epidemic. The government response: it did not fund the NHS properly. It reduced the number of beds per capita in the UK. Despite the heroic efforts of the NHS staff, 208,000 people died from COVID. With the NHS, 117,000 people last year died while waiting for a hospital appointment. Marie Curie Charity reports that 93,000 people died from poverty in 2019. My lords, no previous government has killed so many of its own people. Why has this government not reflected on this organised democide in the name of its defunct economic ideology? We need a public inquiry into the real human cost of what the government has done, and we need that as soon as possible. But the government is not reflecting on what it has done to the people. We have chancellors who are promising even more austerity. They are saying, yep, every public department has to be cut. There have to be more cuts to people's wages. There have to be more cuts to benefits. We have at the same time millionaires, patriotic millionaires, urging the government to say, please tax us more. But the government won't do it. Government can easily raise billions, for example, by taxing unearned income at the same rate as earned income. If it applied that to capital gains, that would raise 25 billion, which could be used to reduce inequalities. But the government is not going to do that. So finally, I would say, for God's sake, please go. Let the Labour government do the proper thing for the country.